Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we have a brand new deck for you, and just as a quick heads up, this is not a budget deck, although I do think it should be fairly easy to find substitutes for those expensive cards. But before we do that, just a quick reminder to please click subscribe if you enjoy my videos. I'm currently growing the channel and I'm getting very close to 1,000 subscribers, so it would mean the world to me if you could support me. And today we're talking about Elesh Norn, and if you have somehow been living under a rock and don't know what Elesh Norn does, for 2 colors and 2 white, she's a legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor, 3/5 with vigilance, and whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you or a permanent you control, that source's controller loses 2 life unless they pay 1. And for 2 colorless and 1 white, sacrifice 3 other creatures, exile Elesh Norn, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery. The flip side is the Argent Etchings. It has 3 chapters. The first one is incubate 2 5 times, then transform all incubator tokens you control. The second is creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain double strike until end of turn. And the third is destroy all other permanents except for artifacts, lands, and Phyrexians. Exile the Argent Etchings, then return it to the battlefield front face up. So this is an absolutely insane magic card, obviously. The flip side is going to mostly win you the game if you ever get to pull those abilities off in sequence. But the front side isn't too shabby. It makes it incredibly difficult for your opponents to attack you, so it gives you a lot of time to set up what you need to do. You could also even use it aggressively, and if your opponents are getting low, then your army of tokens is going to be very difficult to deal with, because if they block them, they have to tie up all of their mana to make sure they don't take a ton of damage. In any case, in this deck, we've been building around that Phyrexian tribal theme, and obviously we're also building around a token theme because she wants to be sacrificing creatures, and on the front side the card also works really well with tokens, so those are the 2 main themes that we're building around. This is going to be a more straightforward deck tech than others because it's a mostly tribal Phyrexian deck. You can actually modify this a bit if you want to and make it more about hate bears, which would be something that I'm interested in doing because the front side is kind of stack seed, so it'd be kind of interesting to have more effects like that, such as Aven Mind Sensor or Leonin Arbiter and stuff like that to mess with your opponents. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started with Adeline Resplendent Cathars. This is obviously a really good card in the deck because it's going to make multiple bodies off of 1 card, and we're going wide, so it's probably going to be quite big itself. Annex Sentry is a Phyrexian that also comes with an O-Ring style effect where you get to get rid of an artifact or creature that your opponents control until they deal with this. The Toxic is not super relevant, but if we manage to get a swing in early, we do have a couple of proliferate effects in the deck, so it actually might end up mattering. Basilica Shepherd is a decently sized flyer that comes with 2 1/1 tokens attached that are all Phyrexian. Benny Brack's Zoologist is going to draw us a ton of cards in this deck since almost all of our deck makes tokens. Blade Splicer is going to make Phyrexian tokens, which is great, and then it's also going to give our golems first strike. We have a mild golem sub-theme, so it's kind of good. Crawling Chorus is an early drop that gives us another body when it's sacrificed or when it dies, so that works well with Elesh Norn. Darksteel Splicer is another good card for the golem sub-theme. This can give us 10 power for 7 mana in a 4-player game, which is not bad, and 9 of that is indestructible, so it's going to make it very difficult for your opponents to hit you after you play this. Defiler of Faith is going to be really good in a deck with this many white permanents, and it's also going to make tokens, which we're interested in as well. Elesh Norn Grand Cenobite is in here for thematic reasons, but also it's a Phyrexian that works really well with tokens. Elesh Norn Mother of Machines is there for similar reasons. A lot of our cards make tokens on ETP, so this is actually going to mess a little bit with our opponents whilst increasing our board state. Essence of Orthodoxy is going to give us an incubate token. That's something we want, and then every time another Phyrexian enters the battlefield, we get to incubate again. Seeing as a lot of our tokens are actually Phyrexians, this is going to trigger a lot and probably be one of the best cards in the deck. Filigree Vector can put a +1/+1 counter on all of our board, which is really nice, and then it actually gives us a way to work with those counters by having a built-in proliferate effect, so this can be a pretty good card in this deck. Guardian Scalelord might seem like a weird inclusion, but to be honest, we have some fairly decently sized creatures, and this giving them flying and that reanimation ability can mean that they're probably going to get through. After that, this is basically a Sun Titan with evasion for 1 mana less, so that's pretty solid. Knight of the White Orchid is a great way to ramp if one of our opponents is a little bit ahead of us. Master Splicer brings a decent amount of stats to the table and pumps all of our golems. They're also Phyrexians. Mentor of the Meek should be easy to draw cards with in the deck with so many low to the ground creatures. Mirror Entity is not only a Phyrexian, but it also is going to be a very good way to finish the game by being able to dump our mana into it and make all of our tokens huge. Might Overseer is a really solid card in this deck. It's going to pump all of our tokens, and it's a Phyrexian itself. Giving our tokens first strike makes them a lot harder to deal with, especially in combination with some of the other cards in the deck. And then it also has a nice ability that we can use to make more tokens on demand. Mondrak Glory Dominus is great in a token deck, and it's also thematically fitting as a Phyrexian. Mere Convert is in here merely so it can add some mana. Norn's Choir Master is pretty nice in this deck. We probably aren't going to be attacking that much with Elesh Norn, but it's nice to have the option. Norn's Inquisitor is going to be really good with all of those incubate tokens we're making. It's going to make them much bigger, and it works really well with Elesh Norn's first Saga chapter. Phyrexian Censor is basically a one-sided stacks piece in this deck. It's pretty gross. Phyrexian Vindicator is a decent Phyrexian. This is one of the weaker cards in the deck. We could probably cut it for something else if you wanted to. Plague Mirror is another decent Phyrexian that's going to tap for mana. Brother of the Steel Legion is going to work so well with all of our tokens. It makes it much likelier that they don't die when they attack, and that means that Elesh Norn's front side ability is really annoying. Progenitor Exarch is absolutely amazing in this deck. We can cast it at multiple different points in the game and get a bunch of bodies off of it at any point, and then it also being able to flip stuff for free saves us a bit of mana now and then. Rumor Gatherer is going to be scrying a lot and drawing us cards in this deck. Scholar of New Horizons is a bit of a speculative one. I think we have enough counters in the deck that this should be good, but if after playing it a bit I realize that that's not the case, we can always sub it out for a mana rock. Skrelv Defector Might is going to be really good as a Phyrexian that provides a lot of value to our deck by giving us protection. Soul of New Phyrexia similarly gives us protection, but it's a different kind. Basically, it's going to give us protection against board wipes. Suture Priest is good as a way for us to gain a nice bit of life with all the tokens we're making, and it also messes with our opponents. Vulpine Harvester is almost always going to be able to return artifacts from the graveyard to play, so that's really solid. Welcoming Vampire should draw us quite a few cards, and since we have ways to make tokens on our opponent's turns, that can actually work really nicely. Finally, Wormcoil Engine is just a big dumb threat that also happens to be a Phyrexian and make Phyrexian tokens. Moving on to artifacts, we have Endless Atlas, which in any monocolor deck is going to draw a bunch of cards. Halo Fountain can either draw us cards or make tokens. We're happy with both of those. Idol of Oblivion can also draw us cards. Norn's Wellspring is an interesting one because it gives us Scry, which is really solid, and then we can just draw some cards as our creatures start dying more and more. Oketra's Monument is going to reduce the cost of almost all of our creatures, and it's also going to give us a token every time we play one, which are both things we're really happy with. Pearl Medallion is going to reduce the cost of about 50 cards in our deck, which is fantastic. Shrine of Loyal Legions is going to be really good in a mono white deck, and it can actually be good as board wipe insurance as well, because we can just wait till somebody wipes the board and then cash this in. Skull Clamp is obviously great in a deck with this many tokens. Staff of Completion is a card that we're really interested in this deck, and it does a lot of work, as in most of my recent decks. It proliferates, which is really nice, and it can also tap for mana or draw us a card. Proliferating in particular is really good, since with this we can do it on demand and skip through Elesh Norn's Saga chapters really quickly. Finally, we have Weatherlight Completed, which is very thematically fitting and is eventually going to draw us a ton of cards. Otherwise, we're going to be able to scry, which is also nice. Moving on to instants, we have Core the Copper Coats, an instant way to make a ton of tokens. Charge of the Might similarly can make tokens at instant speed that are also Phyrexians, or it can just be a removal, both of which are really good. Clever Concealment gives us some nice board wipe protection, and with all of the tokens we have, it shouldn't be difficult to do. Excise the Imperfect is very fitting thematically, and it's a pretty decent removal spell. In a pinch, if we really need a creature, we can wait till our opponent tries to kill one of ours and respond by exiling with this, and then immediately being able to attack during our next turn. And Rootborn Defenses is a solid board wipe protection spell that also creates a token. Next up, we're moving on to sorceries. We have Phyrexian Rebirth. This is obviously really nice because it leaves us a huge Phyrexian after we wipe the board. Sunder the Gateway is a nice bit of artifact or enchantment removal that can double up as a 2/2 if we needed to. Sunfall is another board wipe that leaves us with a huge Phyrexian, and this one exiles as well. And White Sun's Twilight is another board wipe that leaves us with a bunch of Phyrexians, so all of these board wipes are amazing. Finally, we have enchantments. Anointed Procession is great in any token deck, and this is no different. Phyrexian Awakening comes with a huge body when we pay the 2 mana, and Phyrexians we control have Vigilance as well, which is really nice. Vigilance with the front side of Elesh Norn is really good. Skrell's Hive provides us a steady stream of Phyrexian token bodies, so it's going to be one of the best cards in the deck. And finally, we're moving on to our lands. We have Emeria the Sky Ruin, which is one of my favorite lands of all time. I'm so happy anytime I get to put it in a deck. Inventor's Fair is really good with all the artifacts we've got in the deck and gives us a nice little bit of tutoring. Khan's Bastion is a great way to proliferate if we have mana lying around. Nykthos Shrine to Nyx is great in any monocolor monocolored deck, it's going to add a ton of mana here. War Room is similarly good in any monocolored deck as a way to draw extra cards, and Wind Risk Heights is basically an auto-include since we have so many tokens that we're going to be looking to attack with. So there you have it, my Elesh Norn deck tech. Are you excited about playing this one? I think this deck looks like a blast to play. And as a quick aside, I'm almost at 1,000 subscribers, which is a huge milestone for me, so thank you very much if you are subscribed, and if you're not, please consider doing so because it would mean the world to me. What do you think? Are there any things you would change? Any additions that you think I missed? Please let me know in the comments section below. I read all comments and respond to all of them too. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next time, take care. Woo!